Hey guys, I'm Jessie, and today I am going to be sharing all of my must-read, favorite, completed adult fantasy series. Some of my favorite series are not completed, so we will not be talking about those. There will be no mention of like Stormlight Archives or The Bloodsworn by John Gwen, because they're not completed, though they are favorites of mine currently. All of these are completed series. You can go out and read every single book in the series and be done with it, binge read it, and you don't have to wait on a release except one where the last book is coming out like in April, but I read the arc and am still going to recommend it in this video because it is so close to coming out and I have finished the series. So if you're looking for some really good adult fantasy that you can just sink your teeth into and binge a whole series, then check out some of these. The first one is going to be my honorable mention because the last book doesn't come out technically until I believe April, but I was lucky enough to get an advanced reader copy on NetGalley, and that is the Drowning Empire series by Andrea Stewart, the first book being The Bone Shard Daughter. I actually have an entire review of this series. I don't believe it is up yet. It might be, it might not be. If it is, I will link it. But basically, this is a multi-POV adult fantasy where we have a corrupt government and we're trying to either overthrow it or change it, but we're getting so many different POVs from within the empire that it makes it super interesting. First off, we're following Lynn, who is actually the daughter of the emperor, and she's just kind of trying to regain her memories that she's lost, as well as earn her spot as heir by kind of competing against her foster brother for that position. Then we have Jovis, who is an unwitting hero who really just wants to find his missing wife, but kind of gets drug into being a hero. Then we have Feilu, who is the daughter of a governor, and she doesn't really like the way things are being run, but isn't really sure how to change it. And we also have Ramani, who is a street orphan who is actually in a relationship with Feilu. So they are from two different worlds, and we get, her point of view and her frustration at, how sheltered technically Feilu has been her whole life. It is such a cool series. We also have like talking animal companions and forbidden magic and ancient magic that has come back and this like big like kind of mystery throughout the plot and some really cool magic systems that have to do with bones and bone shards, and then we have like an elemental magic kind of in there. So it is such a cool series, and I highly recommend picking it up because the last book is coming out very, very soon. Next up, we have The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. This is so good. This is a Chinese-inspired fantasy series, and it is definitely on the darker end of adult, bordering into grimdark. I will say definitely check out the trigger warnings and the content warnings in this book before you pick it up. There are some very dark moments, some very difficult to read scenes within this book. There's one chapter in particular that is literally like ripped right out of the headlines of things that actually happened during World War II in China. So definitely look into that. I don't want to kind of spoil anything if that doesn't bother you, but I would say to look that up because it does get very dark. In this series, we are following Ren, who is a war orphan, and basically her foster family is terrible, and they're like, we're just going to marry her off to this old gross man that she doesn't like. So Ren just studies and studies and studies, and she takes this entrance exam for this very elite school, and she gets in. But of course, she is like, not really accepted within the school because she is poor and an orphan, and most people that go there are, kind of upper class. She does make some friends. She makes some not so friends. And she ends up training with kind of this like wizened old mentor who is one of the teachers there in like shamanistic magic. And then the shit hits the fan. That is just the first half of the book, is her at the school. And then it's like wartime. So there's like a big change in tone from the first part of this book to the second part of this book. And a lot of people didn't like that. I actually appreciated it because it kind of is that gap between, you know, growing up and then being in the real world. So like it's very stark when it happens, and that is when it starts to get really like brutal and violent. There are some really cool magic like in this book. It is based around like the gods, and the gods basically like possessing you or like being a part of you, but it will drive you crazy because like no one can actually like sustain it. And Ren is a fantastic anti-hero, hero, antagonist, protagonist. Like, she's not super likable all the time, but I love it. I love this series. My favorite, absolute favorite one is the second book, The Dragon Republic. And then, of course, we've got Katai, who is probably my favorite character in the series. And he is just like a cinnamon roll, and very contrast to Ren, who is very like gruff and not a cinnamon roll, but I highly recommend this series. It's one of my absolute favorites. Another one of my favorite adult fantasy books that just happens to be a little dark is the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin. I honestly struggle to recommend this to people because I don't think everyone's gonna like it. She has a very unique writing style. Part of this book is written in second person, and it can be very confusing. And really, you just kind of gotta go along for the ride and be confused until the end, and then be like, oh, okay. And then still be confused about other things. But honestly, this series is fantastic. We are set in kind of a post-apocalyptic world where there are 5 seasons, the regular 4, and then the apocalypse. And these 5th seasons happen so regularly that people are prepared for them. They have like rules and preparations in place for like world-ending events. And we are in a world-ending event during this book itself, and we are following a couple different POVs. The first one is a mom, and she comes home to find that her husband has killed their 4-year-old son and ran off with their slightly older daughter. And she's kind of on this quest to find her, I guess, ex-husband and daughter while trying to mourn the death of her son. And the other POV we are following is a very young girl, probably about 6 or 7, as she is taken away from her family and taken to this like training school to basically learn how to harness and control her innate magical abilities. And then the third and final POV is a like 20-ish year old girl who is already in this school and has graduated and is now training to kind of work with the government to utilize her magic to help people. And the thread that kind of ties all 3 of them together is all 3 of them are like the magic users in this world. But the problem is in this world, those magic users, while they are the people that can help with earthquakes and fires and things like that, it's like an earth magic almost. They are also looked down upon, and they are like cast out of society. And basically, if you are found in possession of this magic, if you are able to do it, you have a couple options. One of them is you're killed. The other is you're basically enslaved by the government and have to work for them. And it is a wild ride, and I absolutely love this series. On a slightly less dark note, we have A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. I feel like this is a really good bridge book between somebody that has pretty much only read YA fantasy and wants to get into adult fantasy. I think this is a really good one because it's not like dark and grimdark and confusing like some of the others. This one is a really good like intro to adult fantasy. And it is a portal fantasy. And in this world, we are following Kel, who can kind of go between worlds. And then we are following Lila, who is from the Grey London world. And Grey London has no magic. Red London is flush with magic. And White London is stagnant from losing magic. And we follow Kel and Lila as they kind of meet and their journeys collide, and they are trying to take this stolen artifact basically back and fix their big screw up, and it's a really fun book. And the series as a whole, I think, is really well done. I love V.E. Schwab. I don't think she's written anything that I have read that I have not liked. So take that as you will. But again, this is really fun. There is a very slight undertone of romance. But it's not like a massive part of the plot. This is not what I would consider a fantasy romance. So definitely check this one out, especially if you're newer to adult fantasy. It's a good time. Then we have Queen of Blood by Sarah Beth Durst. This is the first book in the Queens of Rinthia series. And it is what solidified to me that Sarah Beth Durst is one of my favorite authors. This is such a cool and unique fantasy series. In this first book, we are following Delina. And as a child, she ends up kind of stopping her village from being ravaged by these like spirits that inhabit the forest and are violent and kill people. While she wasn't able to prevent all of it, she was able to save herself, her sister, and her parents. And after that, when she kind of realizes that she has this innate ability, she ends up applying for this school that kind of trains the women of this world who are magic users up to be able to protect people, because only women in this world are the magic users, and they are able to kind of control these spirits depending on how strong their magic is. So we have a queen in this world, and the queen is the person who is responsible for safety, right? She is the one who has all the magic kind of flow into her and can stop the bad earth spirits and wind spirits from killing people, basically. And her power is kind of dwindling, and so they're looking for another queen. There's competition. And what I love is that Delina is not very good. She doesn't want to be the queen. She doesn't want to be an heir who is kind of like, like next in line, kind of like the royal guards almost. She wants to just do her best and help, and she works really hard, and she's still not the best at certain things in magic. And I really like that, because she's basically the opposite of a Mary Sue. Like, she's just not very good, but she tries really hard. And I also really love that she has this like group of girlfriends, and there's no like infighting or competing or not like other girls or anything like that in this book. So honestly, I really, really love the relationship dynamics in this book. And then we get into the second book, and the second book actually introduces my favorite character, who is a kind of middle-aged mom of two who has amazing power potential, but doesn't want it. And it is just one of my favorite series. It's really cool, really unique, and I'd highly recommend it. And then we have the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson. I won't spend too much time on this. This is a completed adult fantasy series, and I absolutely loved it. I've talked about it a million times. I actually just finished The Lost Metal, which is the last book in Era 2. So there is actually 2 completed series within this series. So yeah, we've got this one, and it is 3 books, and then we have Era 2, which takes place 300 years later, and that is 4 books. You definitely have to read this one first, because the second one won't make any sense. But pick this up. I don't feel like I have to describe it or say much about it. This was actually one of my first adult fantasy books that kind of got me back into reading after a very long hiatus, so I don't think it needs much introduction, so Mistborn. And then the final book on my list of completed fantasy series that I absolutely love is the Daevabad series, and this is City of Brass, the first book by S.A. Chakraborty. This is a Arabian-inspired fantasy, and it is fantastic. We are following Nari, who is like a street orphan, kind of like our Aladdin-esque character. And she ends up inadvertently waking up a Jinn warrior who then sweeps her off to the magical city of Daevabad because she might not be as human as she thinks she is. So we are following her journey, and then we are also following the Jinn warrior who is taking her to Daevabad, and then we are also following the second son to the king of Daevabad, who is like a scholar and like he's a warrior, but really he's like kind of a bookish nerd, and he doesn't really fully agree with like the politics within Daevabad, but he also doesn't really do too much to change it. And we're following all three of them and their stories and how they collide, and I absolutely love it. The whole series is fantastic. There is a slight love triangle, kind of, not really. There is a little bit of romance, but it's not an overarching aspect of the plot. Like, it is just such a really cool story, and I loved it, so I would recommend this one. All right, well, those are all of the completed adult fantasy books that I would recommend to anybody wanting to either get more into adult fantasy or has been just like looking for a new completed series to binge read. They are all really good, really fun. Some of them are really dark, but still really, really solid series. Let me know what you think about these series, if you've read any of them, if you plan on reading any of them, and let me know in the comments what some of your favorite completed adult fantasy series are. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. My name is Jessie, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.